Hey, this is an appeal to Kyle Kulinski. I hope he sees this because I'm trying to reach him. Basically, I saw one of his videos, which I liked. I've watched Kyle for a long time. I appreciate what he says. I think he's a very sensible guy, and I would am really hoping that Kyle. We talked about this video was basically about people in line, and he showed the line of cars that were lined up that looked for food that looked very much like the line during the Great Depression. And what I would say to Kyle is that we need New Deal Democrats. We need the progressive movement and the Democratic Party to understand the New Deal. And there's two main points I'd like to make. The first one is the New Deal was relief, recovery, and reform. Relief, I think the progressive movement, the Democrats understand. We got to give people money. We got to give people food. We got to get our population fed. It is inhumane not to feed our population. But what is not understood at all is reform is vitally important too. In 1933, Roosevelt passed the Glass Steagall Act. That was the beginning of financial reform in America, and it was eventually overturned in the early 2000s by the Democrats under Clinton, and which I found horrifying, and I think a lot of people did. But we have to get Democrats to understand the New Deal. And my big issue currently with the Democratic Party is I think that a lot of Democrats, maybe it's because of the way our schools are or whatever else, don't really seem to understand the differences between Roosevelt and Stalin. They've read the Communist Manifesto and they see the world the way Stalin saw the world, with class conflicts and racial conflicts and all the rest of that. But they don't understand that, and the Soviet Union had a lot of problems and ended up not being a great place for its people. It failed. It had huge famines. It wiped out the Kazakhs in Kazakhstan, wiped out 80% of them when Stalin tried to collectivize the farms. So we have all these Democrats that understand that entire piece of it. But what they don't understand at all was what American socialism was about. And that's the type of thing that Roosevelt put together: the relief, recovery, and reform. And they certainly don't understand anything about the reform aspect. And I would like to my message to the Democrats or to the progressives or to Kyle, because is that the situation is dire. And the thing that everyone needs to understand is very simple. Debt that cannot be repaid will not be repaid. So this is an appeal to the progressives and the Democrats in particular to go back and look at what Roosevelt did in the New Deal and support New Deal legislation. Support the laws that we had on the books for a very long time that stabilized our economy. Glass Steagall. Let's stop banks from buying back their own stock. And at the end of the day, we're probably going to have a debt jubilee, because the alternative is horrifying. So this is the video that inspired my appeal to Kyle, and good job for making this.
Crisis in America, which isn't getting nearly enough coverage, and it's this giant uptick in Americans who are going hungry. So you see, I have this is for the Great Depression, the food lines, and I got similar pictures from today now. This is seriously Great Depression level stuff. So I'm for everybody just listening to the show, it's on the screen. You're seeing a bunch of pictures of the lines at food banks, and it's unconscionable. I didn't think I would see anything like this in my lifetime, but I'm seeing it. And what's concerning to me is the lack of coverage. Now, these pictures, Vox put these together. I have seen little pieces on it here and there. Some nightly news, some local news has covered it. But really, I haven't seen the extensive coverage that it deserves. Like, to me, look at how much a fake scandal like Russiagate. Look at how much coverage that got. And now compare that to the fact that millions of people in the United States of America are going hungry, and it's not even getting 1/10 the coverage. It's not getting one.
He said some things that I agree with, which is that this is being vastly underreported. This is horrifying, and honestly, it's only just begun. It's gonna get worse, and the whole system is so politicized that it's hard to get real stories out because nobody wants to talk about real stories. They want to one up each other, and so I salute Kyle for that. But what I want to talk about with Kyle, the appeal that I want to make to Kyle, is based around one very, very simple concept about what is currently wrong with America. And what is currently wrong with America, and a concept that Democrats and Republicans don't get, is that debt that cannot be repaid will not be repaid. It really doesn't matter what you do. And for the last 20 years, really all that Wall Street has done has been find new and innovative ways to package debt. And packaging debt does not change debt. You can put off the consequences, and that's what we've done. We've put off the consequences for a long time. But the appeal that I have is we need New Deal Democrats. We really need New Deal Democrats. And I don't see any New Deal Democrats around. And I don't know if I think that's because in school, you learn, honestly, in college, people are learning a lot more about the Communist Manifesto than the New Deal. They're learning the way Stalin saw the world and not the way Roosevelt saw the world. And those are vastly different ideas. So the New Deal had three pieces to it: relief, recovery, and reform. And relief is the part that the progressives, and I'm completely for relief. I'm a huge fan of the New Deal. We need the New Deal to come back. But what people is so underreported is the reform part. Reform, financial reform, fixing the system is vital. And there's a very easy place to start, which is the legislation that we originally had during the New Deal, especially the Glass Steagall Act. We can start by going back to a financial system that we had for a long time. It's the American financial system. The Glass Steagall Act was the law of the land from 1933 up until about 2000, when it was overturned with the help of Bill Clinton. Which was horrifying. So the Glass Steagall Act did a lot of things. It created FDIC insurance, which we still have. Banks don't particularly like. It also separated commercial and investment banking, because in investment banking, you're going to be taking risks, lots of nasty risks. And during the Depression, investment banking risks were about buying stock on margin. Today, we have something that's so much worse than that, and that is derivatives. OTC derivatives, over-the-counter derivatives. Derivatives that we really, one of the aspects of OTC derivatives is they're not on an exchange. They're not they're not regulated almost at all. So in 2008, 2009, we had the financial crisis, right? So the financial crisis was caused by collateralized debt, collateralizing loan payments. So we had a securitization of mortgage payments that we could buy and trade and insure with credit default swaps. And it was a giant, giant mess. It was a debt bomb that hit America all at once. And if you go to 2009, in 2009, the average American company, this was already starting to happen. Corporate paper, corporate loans were starting to be securitized. And the average American company owed $2 of debt for every $1 it earned. Today, that's $3 of debt for every $1 it earned. And there's a lot of companies, like Boeing, for instance, that has $37 of debt to every dollar they earn. And that's because the thing that Wall Street's trading right now, or loves right now, are CLOs. And if that sounds a lot like the CDO that was the whole problem back in 2009, you're absolutely right. A collateralized loan obligation, it's securitized payments from mid-size and large business loans pooled together into classes of different tranches. It's a type of securitized debt. And at the end of the day, what we have created this giant ball of debt. And what you're seeing is the issue is the consumer debt. It's horrifying. People are living paycheck to paycheck because when you inject so much debt into society, it inflates the value of assets. And when assets are inflated, they're inflated versus the value of labor. We want labor to be worth more and assets to be worth less. We want people to make more money, but their houses should cost less. So when we threw this giant ball of debt, it inflated the cost of assets, but it didn't increase people's earnings. So we're stuck here. And what I say, I'm not a member. I generally have voted Democrat, but I think the Democrats have gone completely off the rails. And there's nobody left that represents the New Deal Democrats, that represents what Roosevelt brought in. And luckily, if we brought back Glass Steagall, for one, that would be a huge help. But there's other things. It was illegal for companies to buy back stock at America up until the early 80s. That was illegal. We have to stop companies from buying back their own stock. Because what they're going to do is they're going to go in there and they're going to take on as much money, as much debt as they can to buy that stock. So it inflates the stock price and executives are going to be able to make more money. But it's going to leave the company completely cash strapped. So if anything hits that company, the company's immediately going to be in trouble and need federal bailouts. We are past the point of systemic failure. This is systemic failure. And what we need, we've only had systemic failure one other time. That was the Great Depression. And thankfully, we had somebody there, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who understood the gravity of the situation. In the Democratic Party today, they've done a lot to, as much as the Republicans. They've both been on the same team, and that team is Team Wall Street. Clinton overturned the Glass-Steagall Act originally with the Securities Modernization Act, and I think it was Graham Bleach Bliley, and then the Holder Doctrine, Eric Holder, with the Holder Doctrine is basically that they're not going to prosecute banks because if banks fail, they're too big to fail, and it will create systemic failure. So we didn't prosecute banks, and the things that they were doing got larger and larger and larger, and it wasn't what we did was we don't have small systemic failure now. We have the whole system has failed, and it's not coming back. Those lines are going to get longer. We can't. There's so much debt, personal debt, corporate debt, government debt. You cannot finance yourself out of hell. It just doesn't work. There's only one solution, and that is a debt jubilee. We have to write down debts, and we have to take out banks, and we have to take out hedge funds, and we have to take out private equity. And as long as Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan is the guy that Clinton and Obama and most of the Democrats think is the expert in this area, we are going to be in big trouble because Jamie Dimon is never ever going to do this. We need a wing of the Democratic Party or the progressive movement that are New Deal Democrats. We need relief, but if we don't have reform, we're going to be tossing money down a hole till the end of time. The bailouts will never stop. We're going to have to put this country into tremendous pain to fix this problem. But the other options are, we'll have 6 or 7 oligarchs. We'll have Russian-style oligarchs that own everything. And it'll be neo-feudalism. It'll be what happened if you read in the Soviet Union after the fall of communism, where the people's, under communism, it was everybody's supposed to own everything these oligarchs suddenly owned it. How did Khodorkovsky own Yukos? Yukos was a government, Russian oil was owned by the government. Now suddenly there's an individual that owns it. And suddenly there's an individual that owns media. And suddenly, and people can't understand why the Russian people are angry about this. It's because how in 3 years did we get an oligarch that owned something that was owned by everyone before that? And I'm not saying that communism was working in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that that's the type of situation that we're going to look at. If you look at a country like Moldova or Belarus, this is the situation that we're going to put the American people in. And we're not used to that. I am telling you that if we can get the New Deal Democrats going again, then, and it's going to be difficult because Democrats very much understand relief we can give, and progressives. Okay, we should give money to people. We should give this to people. And I agree with all that. My only objection is really that you've got to create reform. Relief, recovery, reform. Without reform, relief never would have worked during the New Deal. So my appeal to Kyle is this. I think Kyle's a smart guy. I honestly respect the way he does his program. And I watch a lot of different programs. I watch Kyle. I watch Tucker Carlson on Fox. I like Tucker Carlson. I watch The Hill. I think they do a great job. I mean, my favorite program, of course, is Max Kaiser, The Kaiser Report, Mad Max, who talks a lot about these things. But my appeal to Kyle would be go out and talk to Max Kaiser. And, you know, we got to change something in the Democratic Party or the progressive movement because reforming the New Deal, the American people are hungry for the New Deal. We did this once before and we can do it again. Right now, people are not talking about solutions. And theirs really are. They're horrifying. They're awful. They're painful. But there are solutions. We've been through this before. We got through the Great Depression. And we got through the Great Depression because we had the core things, financial reforms that I think are required, bringing back the Glass Steagall Act. That's number one. Number two is stopping companies from buying back their own stock. That would be incredibly useful so that companies are not trying to create a system to enrich executives, but and they have more reserves. Number three, which is the nuclear bomb, really, is the Jubilee. And that is brutal to organize. It's difficult. It's going to require a tremendous amount of courage and most modern Democrats are so beholden to J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, who practically write their policy, that that is going to be exceptionally horrible. But at the end of that, and if we can get through that, we can start rebuilding the country with a solid financial base. Our relief programs will be built on top of something, not just printed money. And we're not going to head into some sort of neo-feudalist future, or, for that matter, neo-communist, where we basically have the government owns, the government's buying everything right now. And the progressives, no one's talking about this. The government's buying CLOs and any type of security, private, everything is being, the entire U.S. economy is being taken private or kind of being taken public. And really, at the end of the day, if you've got 6 oligarchs that own everything and run the entire country, or you've got 6 bureaucrats in the government that basically hypothetically don't own everything but run the entire country, isn't it kind of the same thing? So the pain is going to get intense, and it's going to keep getting more intense and more intense and more intense. And we have to have relief. Completely agree with having relief. We probably need to bring back something like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Tennessee Valley Authority, but we absolutely have to get that reform piece. I'm asking Kyle, this is an appeal, let's start talking about the New Deal Democrats and what that means versus your modern progressive Democrats. Because if we don't, if and I'm going to tell you also something else about that I've always that I don't have never really liked or understood about the progressive Democrats. I've asked this of many progressives along the way. What is the difference between socialism in Sweden and socialism in Venezuela? And here's the answer I usually get: racism. Venezuela can't, Sweden is a strong, wealthy country because the America somewhat likes it because and Venezuela isn't because it's Hispanic. And I never understood that. So here's the answer that I thought they would say. Well, Sweden is a liberal democracy that that has strong social programs, but it also has free enterprise. I mean, IKEA is a Swedish company. Nokia is a Swedish company. Conversely, Venezuela has a president for life. We can call him whatever you want, authoritarian dictator, what have you. But it's a president for life. And he likes to plan the economy himself, which is a centrally planned economy, which has generally failed. So if you want to figure out which socialist countries are going to do well, probably the democracies. And that also somewhat respect free enterprise. And if you want to find the ones that are going to do badly, just look for the ones with presidents for life. Presidents for life never work. The modern progressive movement doesn't understand. It needs to understand what the difference was between Roosevelt and Stalin. We need Roosevelt. We don't need Stalin. We don't need more people that read the Communist Manifesto. We need more people that understand relief, recovery, reform. That is the difference.